Okay, today we're going to do lesson 2.3, which is the purpose of man. Last time we talked about creation week and the different views there. So this week, the question that we want to ask first is, why did God create man? It was a climactic event of the creation week, and so we want to look a little bit more deeply into that. So let's go ahead and look at the text and to ask questions and talk about it. So in Genesis 1:26 or 27, it says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Okay, so first things you notice is this two verses really focus on the image of God. And this is only spoken of in reference to humans. Nothing else is made in the image of God. Now, everything else glorifies God, but nothing's in the image of God. So often the image of God is used of making, the word image is used to making statues or carvings on walls, shapes that have similar in appearance and response, or they resemble something. But in some way, mankind represents the form and function of the Creator. And a human being is made like God. So why? The question we have to ask is why? And it's so that God can communicate himself with people, and that humanity itself can fill the whole world with God's glory. So notice it says, let us and our image and our likeness. There is a plurality there. Okay, so the text, if you notice, it uses the plural. It says, let us, our image, our likeness. And there's a question there of, what does that mean? If God is by himself here, how is he referring to the plural? And there's two ways of taking this. Number one, this could be a reference, an allusion to the triune nature of God, where there's an eternal fellowship within the Godhead. Or other people have saying that this is just simply a plurality of majesty, where a lot of times in the ancient texts they would say we, but it's referring to just the king, but because he's so important, they use a plural. Or sometimes God, in the rest of the Old Testament, communicates, let us do something, and he's talking to his heavenly court, meaning the angels that are there. But we know it's not the angels because in verse 27, it says that then so that God created man. It doesn't say that he did it with the angels. He did it. So it's definitely going to be referring just to God, not to angels. Here, when it says God created man in his own image, in the image of God, he created him, male and female. The word for man there is Adam, which means mankind. And it means humanity, and it's actually the same word that means ground. And the following verbs that are used here are all plural. So that also it's communicated that he created them in the divine triune God. Okay, so if you look, it says, then God said, let us make man in our image, after their likeness, period, and let them have. That is probably not the best translation. More recently in Hebrew grammar and scholarship, the way the grammar is situated, that shouldn't say and let us. It should say so that. It's giving a purpose statement, the way the grammar is. And so it's really here, the idea here is, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, so that they will have dominion over. And so the idea of having dominion over is to rule over, to tend, to take care of, like something that you care about. And remember, this is a sinless state, so everything that they're doing would be in a loving manner. And so the image of God would be a God-given mental, spiritual, and physical capabilities that enable people to relate to God, to know him, and to serve him by ruling over creation, created order, in a way that represents him and thus glorifies him, to be like him as his earthly vice regents, those who are ruling. So the definition that I have here is for the image of God is that it's a God-given mental, spiritual, and physical capabilities to enable people to relate to God and to serve him by ruling over the created order in a way that represents him. Now, relating to God, to know him, that is one of the two primary reasons why we were created, and then to represent him, to glorify him. That's the second reason why we were created, to know him, to glorify him, always and forever. And you can see that through scriptures and how we're coming back to that as well. He's reconciling us to do that as well. So he goes on to say, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So God is telling them to bless them. He blesses them and says to do this, to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth. So if it's the image of God entails his glory, both in how the person relates to God and how they live. So being fruitful and multiplying will literally fill the earth with beings that are glorifying God. And at this time, Satan and sin have not entered into creation yet. And Satan and sin always bring harm, destruction, and death. But God's blessings always brings life, growth, and good things. So here it's saying he's blessing them to bring about new life, new growth, and good things that are going to be spreading throughout the whole world. And if you were going to classify this, what would this classification be as far as be fruitful and multiply? We know that, but also fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion. What would that second half be? I mean, we know be fruitful and multiply. They're supposed to procreate and to fill the earth, to subdue it, and to have dominion. What if we're going to give it a name as far as what man is supposed to do? This, what would it be?
Like steward it.
Good. Yeah, and just have a job. They're created to work. And God's creating the work. And this is the perfect world before sin. So work is not part of the curse. It's part of God's original design. And verse 28 explains God's intentions for ruling over creation in his image of both Adam and Eve, where there's plural imperatives, to procreate and to fill the earth and rule over it comprehensively and together. So here where it says be fruitful and multiply, he's not talking just the Adam. He's talking to Adam and Eve, giving those both commands. And to subdue it and have dominion, both of them, or to have dominion over it. And that is the idea, to take care of it, to subdue it, to work it, to make it even more beautiful and productive. Subdue has the idea of harnessing its potential and using its resources for the benefit of all. So that's to cultivate the fields, its use of mining minerals, using materials for construction, and possibly using its animals. So all of this is saying that the whole creation was designed and given over for man to use, to enjoy, and to bring glory to God. Okay, looking at verse 29, and God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, and everything that has breath of life. I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. So the resources here was to carry out that purpose, that mission, giving them food so that they can live on. And it's obviously both animals and humans at this point were all vegetarians. And why do you think he mentions seeds? What did he just tell them to do?
Replant, reproduce them.
Yes. To plant, to cultivate more food, to be able to sustain themselves, They're going to be working, and everything is after its kind. Everything is an order. Everything's connected to how God originally created it and how he originally designed it. He goes on to say, and God saw everything that he had done, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, a sixth day. So God's evaluation of humanity, both male and female, is not just good, but very good. So is anyone actually good? Well, it was good at this time. The way they were created, they were intended to live in relation with God and to glorify him. It was very good. And they were doing it. Okay, then skipping down to chapter 2, verse 5, it says, and when no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground. When it says something like this, what is it referring to? It's saying there's no plant here. So what day would this be? What day was there ground with no plants? Well, it has to be day 2. So here it's saying when no bush of the field was yet in the land on day 2, and no small plant in the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord had not caused it to rain in the land, and there was no man to work it. So he's going back in time now. And when we see this verse, what are the 2 problems? He's introducing the issues so he can show how God designed to fulfill those things. Now, they're not problems per se, but they're needs. Because God's creating these things, and after each day, it was good. So it's not a problem, but there was a need there. Number 1, the ground needs a system of watering, right? Because he's saying before there was rain, and that there was no human being to work the ground. Okay, so there's 2 things that God already knew what he was going to do, but at this point, those things weren't there to make that system work. So that's what it says in verse 5. And then in verse 6, it says, and a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. Then Yahweh God formed the man of dust from the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. So here is the first solution. On day 2, God caused springs of water to come up from the ground so that there could be a way to sustain plant life. And it was shown how God's designed this ecosystem to work. He's showing things are dependent on other things. And this is how plants got water. So problem number 1 is solved. And on day 6, God created man to cultivate the plants of the earth. So that's problem number 2 solved. Okay, we're moving on to verse 8. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground Yahweh God made to spring up every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. And the tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So it's interesting when it says here that the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east. Well, east of what? You need a point of reference. So what's the point of reference? Where would Moses think the point of reference would be? What's the center of the world, the ancient world in this case of God's people? Would be the land of Israel. So this is east of Israel, somewhere. And if there are trees that are good for food, what does that imply? If there were certain trees that were good for food, it implies what? That there were trees that weren't. Meaning they didn't have fruit as in to eat. So there were certain trees that they wanted to cultivate, certain trees that they wanted to grow in the garden. For instance, like a pine tree that wouldn't necessarily produce, you're not going to eat a pine cone, right? That's not good food for us. There are certain trees that produce fruit. Not every tree was a fruit tree. And what do you think made these trees pleasant to the sight? Did you notice that it says that? That's one of the things that he made. Every tree pleasant to the sight and good for food. Why is it pleasant to the sight? What do you think? What makes a tree beautiful?
Awesome
Hmm.
Foliage.
Yep. And fruit. The colors. Everything is green, right? But then when you have flowers, there's these beautiful whites and reds and pinks and yellows, and then you have fruit that has vibrant colors. And it doesn't say anything here, but it would also be obviously smell wonderful as well. But it's interesting that God created. I mean, even here, right here, it's telling us that God created beauty. God created aesthetics. Things are supposed to look good and pleasant to the sight, and obviously pleasant to the taste. The verse 10 says, "And a river flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and there it divided and became 4 rivers. And the name of the first is the Pishon. It is the one that flowed around the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of the land is good. And Bdellium and onyx stones are there. And the name of the second river is the Gihon. It is the one that flows around the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is the Tigris, that flows east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates." Now, there's rivers that are flowing from a spring that God used to water everything. So there's a spring in the middle, it's watering everything, and these 4 rivers are going out. And why is it divided into 4 rivers? Well, it's telling us that it's watering the 4 corners of the world. It's going out from the garden in 4 different directions, and everything else is getting watered that way. And water is always a symbol of life. It's bringing life to the whole world. And so these four corners of the earth would receive life-giving waters. But the whole landscape, we need to realize, was changed after Noah's flood. So these locations are lost. But Moses was probably still trying to give his modern readership a basic point of reference. This is kind of a map of the area, and the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers are over here in Asia. You can see where it says east of Asia, it's here. And the other 2 rivers are down here. The Pishon and the Gihon are down here. There's the land of Havilah and the land of Cush. So this is Egypt. So this is south of that. And they both start this way. They start, and this goes the opposite direction. And even if you there's no way to kind of revert back before the flood and see where they are. You can't. All these riverbeds, all the geography would have changed. But he's given points of reference of the northeast and the southwest, which is in reference to Israel. It's basically saying all around. And really, in the ancient world, that's the known world. It's Mesopotamia and then Egypt. And then because people went from here to here. So those rivers were covering it, covering the land. Okay, he goes on to say, then Yahweh God took the man and put him in the garden to work it and to keep it. And Yahweh God commanded the man, saying, "You may surely eat of every tree of the garden. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." So here we see God is in full relationship and fellowship with Adam. So he knows God. And again, he tells him to work it and keep it. So this is not a curse, not part of an issue. This is part of the original design of man. And so he had one job, right, to tend this garden, and one command to glorify him was to tend the garden and to enjoy it. That was all part of what he was supposed to be doing. Could Adam, when it says not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for the day that you eat it, you shall surely die, did Adam have a concept of death? Would he know what that is? Did God have to tell him what that meant? Because if there's nothing that died, and there's no concept of death, disease, suffering, decay, anything like that, then how would he understand that? And it's unsure whether he was saying is it physical death or spiritual death? The day you eat it, you will be separated from me, or that you will physically die. Either way, in which both is true, Adam had to be explained. It had to be explained to Adam. And is there anything in it says in this, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat of it. From the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Was there something in the fruit itself that when he ate it, he would have it? Was there something physically in the fruit? Probably not. The fruit was probably just fine. It was that God made a command, and that eating of it was an act of rebellion, and that would be the sin. It would be the actions behind it against the command, and not necessarily the physical thing itself. It wouldn't necessarily be poisonous. So when we look at these verses as far as the purpose of man, we can summarize them as being 5 things. Number 1, the purpose of human beings was to relate to God. He would walk with God, talk with God. It was created to relate to God, to know him. The second one is to be fruitful and multiply. Procreation was part of his design and the purpose of humanity, to fill God's creation with his glory. That's number 3, to fill the earth and to take care of it. And that's what it means by being image bearers. And take care of it is not to abuse it, but to sustain it, to love it, to care of it, and thus to enjoy it and all the benefits that it brings. And then, which is connected to number 4, which is enjoy creation. We were created to enjoy, to have joy, to appreciate the things that God has given us. And just realize this as well. When we say enjoy creation, if you think about enjoying cheesecake, or enjoying a good apple, or a sunset, or anything like that, you have to ask yourself, why? Why do I enjoy that? Why is that good? It doesn't have to be. Everything can taste like broccoli. I like broccoli. But everything can taste like whatever. But things taste differently. And we enjoy certain things over than others. And not everyone is the same. But we enjoy them. We think they're good. We want them more. We would love to see beautiful sunsets and beautiful flowers, and rather than dead things. And why? Why is one form better than the other? Why is one taste better than the other? Or sound, or smell better than the other? It's all designed for God, for our enjoyment. Enjoyment of creation. And number 5 is to live in obedience to the one commandment. That was the purpose. I mean, today we still have one commandment, which is love the Lord your God with all their heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor like yourself. So we still have one commandment ultimately to rule over, to guide all of our decisions. But for Adam, in the purpose of man, it was not to eat of the one tree, which is to love God, to do what is right. Okay. Any questions on the purpose? Okay. So if we want to scoot forward, and we'll talk about marriage. Okay. When we go into the next portion in chapter 2, then we see how God, he already commanded to be fruitful and multiply. But then here he goes back in time and talks specifically about marriage. So if you notice, chapter 1, he went through all creation. Then in the beginning of chapter 2, he goes back within creation, goes deeper into the image of man. And now he's going back in again and go deeper into male and female relations. So it shows, you give me a holistic picture, and going back in. It shows what's important and what he's focusing on. And so he says, then the Lord Yahweh God said, it is not good that man should be alone. So obviously, when is he saying this? What day? Day 6. Day 6 is when he made man. And remember, at the end of the day, he said it's good. But here it's saying it's not good. It's not complete yet. It's not the way it's supposed to be yet. So this is day 6. He says, not good for man to be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. Now the word for helper there is the idea of man has strengths and he has weaknesses, and females have strengths and weaknesses, and they complement one another perfectly. And so when it's saying here it's not good for man to be alone, there's nothing inherently wrong because God created it this way, but God wanted to make it better, to display his goodness to Adam. And then it says, I will make him a helper fit for him, so someone to complement him, and so that the two would be wonderful together. And now out of the ground, Yahweh God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to man to see what he would call them. And whenever he called called every living creature, that was its name. Now, what does the act of naming tell us? So, like Natalie, when you got a new dog or Jackson had a dog, who named it? If it was your dog, you named it. Because then it was yours. And it was your special relationship. You had authority over it. And there was a special ownership and relationship. Now here, man is over the animals to take care of them. So he names them. And he names them all. So you can imagine having one big pet shop. I mean, the whole world was their pets. All the animals were pets, and they loved them and enjoyed them that way. And then man gave names to all the livestock, all the birds of the heavens, and every beast of the field. But for Adam, there was not found a helper fit for him. Okay, so I mean, he named all the kinds. I don't think he gave them, okay, you were a turtle and your name is Ralph. No, it's just like, these are turtles. These are things, but do you see that there is a problem in the passage? God brought the animals before him, and they were always male and female. And so God is bringing up before Adam, hey, there's something missing. He's letting Adam know his need. There's no companion, no helper for man. And Adam knew it. So God led Adam to that conclusion. So he's learning through experience. And then it says, so Yahweh God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man. And while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that Yahweh God had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then the man said, this at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Okay, first question I have is, why deep sleep? It created the circumstances to produce the joys of a very, very, very good surprise. I mean, God could have just said, okay, hold on, Adam, and took it out. He didn't have to do that. But God is creating this because there's joy in this really good surprise. And the word rib there actually means side in Hebrew. So more than likely it means side. Now is there a less rib? Yeah, sure. I mean, that's kind of the church tradition, and that's fine. But the Hebrew word means side. So he took some of his side and made it. Literally, he built it. And we don't know how he built it, but that's what the text says, that he built it. And Yahweh brought Eve to Adam in the same way that he brought the other animals and the birds. So he's like, Adam, one more. Come look at this. Here's something for you to consider. And Adam says, this one at last was made for me. Now, Adam is perfect. His mind is perfect. And there was a lot of animals coming to him. And I don't know how fast. I mean, he's perfect. So it could just be like turtle, pigeon, reptile. He could have done it pretty quickly. And at this time, we have far more different varieties of animals. There was always a certain number of kinds that God created, and that was brought. But God obviously could have brought them just instantly, and Adam could have been instantly have named them. So it wouldn't take very long. But still, Adam is seeing another and another and another and another. But here he says, at last, this is bone of my bone. And Adam here is not naming Eve, but noting that she is like him, but she's different. She's corresponding. She's a companion. And so look at the first emotion and interaction between two human beings. What is it? When this, by the way, is poetry. It's written as Hebrew poetry. So what's the first human reaction? It's joy. we as people are supposed to bring each other joy, especially in marriage. A male and a female, our number one characteristic is joy, as God's special gift for the other. And so God established marriage union between one man and one woman. And it is Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. This is the way he's designed it. Homosexual marriage is not designed to live. We're not designed to live that way in a homosexual marriage. That won't even work, because if God's design was to glorify Him and procreate, fill the earth, they can't do that. And so that's an ultimate slap in the face of God, an ultimate rebellion as far as what He's designed you to do and how He's designed you to be and interact. And polyamorous marriages. God didn't design us to live that way. It was one man and one woman. He could have created 5 women from Adam. He didn't. Or we could have 5 Adams for one woman. He didn't. There's a specific design for creation. And this is establishing it. So notice that then, and this part of the text where he has here, where Adam, when he first sees Eve, this is a poetry. So basically he breaks out in the song and says, "Alas, this is bone of my bone. This is part of me. This is my kind. And you shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." That's not her name, right? Her name is Eve. It's not. It's just describing the characteristics that she's similar. Okay, but now notice Moses then, the next verse, he connects this first marriage to a family unit. So Moses then interacts and says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and unites with his wife, and they become one family. And the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not ashamed. Okay, so when we're talking about marriage here and God's purposes for marriage in Genesis, number 1 is that marriage is a union between one man and one woman. Characteristic number 2 is that a husband and wife form the foundation of a family unit. The two became one family. And a family meaning in which to produce children and heirs. And then number 3, they were completely open. Their complete openness and vulnerability is something that was sacred. They were not ashamed. They were completely one with one another. And when we're saying it was something that was sacred, they weren't ashamed. It was something that was set apart. It was special and designed by God to be shared in marriage. And as we saw earlier, that openness and oneness, that's supposed to be for great joy. When Adam was naked and Eve was naked when she came to him, and there was a great, at last, this is someone for me. Okay, so running it down, just to summarize, how did God create marriage? Marriage is between one man and one woman. Marriage is the basis for the family unit. Marriage is the context for the openness and vulnerability of intimacy, and marriage is for great joy in the companion suitable for you. All right? You have any questions about that? Now, of course, the rest of the Bible adds more to marriage and how it relates and things, and especially how we need to relate once sin entered into the world. But this is the way God originally created it to be and to function. Okay. Anything else?